Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello, everybody. Welcome to a very special bonus episode. This week, we have with us Jeff Gothelf. Hey, Jeff, welcome to the show.
Vasco, it's great to be here. It's nice to see you again, and it's good to be here again.
Absolutely. So Jeff's been on the podcast before. You can find the other episodes in the show notes. I've linked to those there. And Jeff is also a product management expert, an author and keynote speaker known for his impactful work in building better products and fostering innovation cultures. He's the co-author of one of the seminal books, I think, in the, let's say, merging of Agile and UX streams. That's Lean UX. Also, Sense and Respond. And he advises executives and organizations on business agility, digital transformation, and human-centered design. And his latest project is actually the topic of our conversation today. That's the book, Who Does What by How Much? A Practical Guide to Customer-Centric OKRs. So, Jeff, first of all, again, welcome to the show. And to start us off, could you share with us what really drove you to start working on this book? I know that OKRs is a big topic. There's a lot of companies trying to apply, I should say, that framework. But why did you write the book, and why do you think it's particularly relevant now?
There are two reasons why we wrote the book, or in the process of writing it, Josh Seiden and I, by the way. The first was, I feel like I've been kind of headed in this direction for the last 15 years. And so if you think about the levels at which the books that we've written and the conversations that we have with teams have gone, we started with Lean UX. Lean UX was a very practical, tactical, initially a book for designers by designers about how to do design better in an agile world. That was the first conversation. And in the subsequent editions, second edition, third edition of Lean UX, that conversation has gotten bigger to be more cross-functional, to be more, to kind of be broader, a bit more strategic. But nevertheless, it was a fairly tactical, still remains a very practical, tactical book that you can read and figure out what to do. The feedback from Lean UX, now the Lean UX has been officially in the market since March of 2013, so 11 years at this point, and now in its third edition. The feedback has always been the same. Love it, really want to work this way. My boss won't let me work this way, or my company won't let me work this way. And Josh and I took that feedback to heart, and we said, okay, great, let's write a book for the bosses to explain to them two things. One, that you are running a software business, regardless of what you do. And then the second is that managing a software-based business is different than the way that you've managed the business in the past. And that book was called Sense and Respond. And the idea was this book could provide essentially air cover for teams that want to work in a Lean UX style. And that worked to a certain extent. And what was interesting is as we started to work with our customers, with our clients and the teams that we work with, every time we're starting to have these kind of product discovery, Lean UX, Sense and Respond conversations, we inevitably ended up at the HR office and the CFO's office. Like you kind of bump up against the C-suite, right? So if Lean UX is kind of at a very low flight level, Sense and Respond is kind of that upper middle flight level, we found ourselves kind of hitting the ceiling at the C-suite. And the reason for that was no matter how much we convinced people that cross-functional collaboration makes sense, that talking to customers makes sense, that you run a software business and you need to be agile, no matter how much we did that, we kept bumping up against goals. Right? They're like, yes, I want to do this, but my goal is to ship this system by Friday. And if I don't ship this system by Friday, someone's yelling at me or firing me or whatever. And it dawned on us that if we're ever going to get the ideas that we've been advocating for to be a reality consistently, kind of across all organizations, we needed to change goal setting. So, that was the first thing that led us to OKRs. The second thing was the popularity of OKRs had really skyrocketed. And yet lots of organizations were struggling with it. And it was clear to us that they were missing the point, because the point had not been expressed in a very opinionated fashion with the material that was out in the world. So if you read John Doerr's book, he doesn't have a very strong opinion on exactly how OKR should be implemented. And if you work your way kind of down to the more tactical books, Christina Whitkey's got a great point of view on how to apply OKRs to a single team. But as we look to scale it, it doesn't, the detail isn't there. And so for us, there was a clear gap that says we need to talk about goal setting. The material that's out in the world right now does not have a strong opinion about how to use goal setting to create greater organizational agility. And that's the book we're going to write, because that's going to make all the rest of our stuff easier to do.
All right, but let's be clear for our listeners who might not be familiar with the details of implementation of OKRs, and also why sometimes they are implemented in a way that goes against what they are there to do. How do you define goal setting before OKR, what you've seen and what kind of struggles there are with that, and then goal setting after people successfully implement OKRs?
So look, the traditional measure of success for almost every organization is production. It's output. Did you make a thing? Right. And we're battling over 100 years of industrial manufacturing, historical inertia for that, right? Because the measure of success was, did you make the thing? Yeah, there it is. I made the thing. It's tangible, it's real, and it's binary, right? Binary is really easy to measure, right? You either made the thing or you did not make the thing, right? And that mindset has persisted into our software-driven world. And so that continues to be the measure of success for the overwhelming majority of the organizations that we work with, right? How do you measure success? I'd say the revenue, which is a lagging indicator, right? But realistically, on a sprint to sprint, month to month, quarter to quarter basis, it's delivery. Did you make the thing that you said you were going to make? That's it. Now, the issue with that is that the making of a thing takes on a ton of assumptions and therefore a ton of risk that the thing that you're making meets an actual need for an actual person in the real world in a way that they actually want to use or to consume. And the reality is, if we don't build any kind of learning or discovery into our process, we're taking a bunch of guesses about whether or not we've chosen the right thing to build and if we've chosen to build it the right way, instead of looking at, well, what are people actually doing with the stuff that we're putting out there? So in a post-OKR world, and I want to be super clear about this, in a post-OKR world, the way that Josh and I describe it in our book, because if you read John Doerr, you're not going to hear this level of this opinion as strongly held as we have it. In fact, we think it's the big differentiation, is that in a post-OKR world, the measure of success is an outcome. It's customer behavior, right? What will people be doing differently if we solve the problem successfully? And because of that, the book is called Who Does What by How Much, because that's how we teach the material. The way that you measure success is you answer that question. We know that we've built the easiest way to buy furniture online in Europe when, right? Who does what by how much, right? Existing customers spend 50% more average order value, right? Every year, something like that, right? But we're looking for those measures of behavior. And that is a fundamentally different goal than ship the mobile app.
So I guess the skeptical in me would say, okay, that's fine, but that's just another goal. Like, what's the big impact that you expect that way of setting goals will have?
So here's the interesting thing, right? And this is where teams get tripped up on this too. When you manage to outputs, right? Build me the mobile app, make sure it has a big red button that says buy and ship it by Friday. The solution is specified for the team. They can argue over the details of the implementation here and there. Should the button be bright red or light red, or to the left 3 pixels, to the right 3 pixels? whatever it is, right? Should it have 3 steps in the checkout process or 5 steps? You can argue about all of those things, but there's no doubt that you're going to build this thing. When you use OKRs with outcomes or measures of human behavior as your key results, no solution is specified for the team, right? So the objective, again, could be something like build the simplest authentication process in online banking by the end of the year. And our key result could be a 90% reduction in password reset requests. 75% reduction in number of calls to customer service by existing customers who aren't able to log into the system. Things like that. Nothing in there says what you're going to make, how you're going to make it. And so this creates a tremendous opportunity for the team to go out and discover the best combination of code, copy, and design that's going to achieve that behavior change. And here's the best part, right? The best part about all this is that if you work this way and you start pursuing some hypothesis about how to achieve this behavior change, if the feedback that you start to get from the market doesn't show a change in behavior in the way that you expected, you now have collected evidence that justifies changing course. And changing course based on evidence is agile. That's agility, right? So that's the benefit here.
So I mean, you're speaking to the converted, of course, because I was pretending to be a skeptic. I really like, the work you and Josh have done with Lean UX has reverberated through the industry. I still get clients referring to that book and really talking about it as having had a massive influence. Now, they also talk about the same things you said, how do I convince my boss? But in the end, they are talking about delivering some, you call it outcome, in the industry, some will refer to it as value or impact, whatever that is, but it's a concrete change in behavior of a customer or anyone, an actor in the system that helps you achieve an ultimate goal, whether that is, grow market share or reduce costs or whatever that might be. So I really like that you're bringing that up. Now, when you think about OKRs, there is a structure in place, right? There's an organization that is there to implement those OKRs. And I think that a key question for us is, no matter how good the intentions are in implementing OKRs, we need to be aware that that structure will impose its mindset, its language on the OKRs themselves. And a very concrete example that I have is this work breakdown structure mentality when defining OKRs that eventually end up being just tasks, right? Like the OKR is just a task. And then the question is, do you do it by Monday or Wednesday, right? And then you have a stretch of doing it by Sunday night, for example, right? So we need to also change the way we think about setting goals. So you talk about outcomes, managing to outcomes rather than outputs. How do you help your clients change that underlying mental structure that puts them into the, let's call it the deliver a thing mentality, to pick on the phrase that you just used a minute ago?
Yeah, it's hard. and look, I feel like it's the battle I've been fighting throughout my career at this point. I mean, certainly for the last 15 years, which sadly is not the entirety of my career. but no, it's hard. And so how do you get there, right? There are a few ways. Look, we have to get there in ways that are non-career limiting, right? Like that's the trick. The trick, because look, where does this stuff come from? Where do the directives and the prescriptions come from? They come from the top, right? Or at least somebody above you, right? And so somebody says, make me an app and make it red and ship it by Friday, and that's your boss. You're like, in most situations, you can't say no. Right? You can't, because that's your boss. Your boss tells you what to do. At least that's what your boss thinks they do. And so for you to come back, you've got to come back in ways that that ease the change of mindset, because it's not going to be easy, right? So for example, boss says, build me a mobile app, make it red, ship it by Friday. You say, great, boss, terrific. And when we do that and we do a great job, what do we expect our users to be doing differently? Okay, let's just start that conversation. So you're not saying no, you're saying yes, right? Absolutely. We're going to build this thing. What do we expect people to do differently? Well, I expect to see this many downloads. I expect to see this many account creations, this many folks using it once, right? Let's talk about that. And then leave it there and go build the thing. Okay. And then start measuring. Okay. And then let's measure and compare. We thought we'd get 1,000 downloads a day. We're getting 12. Right? We thought we'd get 100 new accounts created every day. We're getting 1. Okay. Let's go find out why that happened, boss. Right. And so what you're doing is you're easing folks into this idea that they might be wrong about, right? So that's one way to do it, right? That's one way. Another way that's a bit more intensive, but still light, right? Is we're gonna prove the model through an experiment. So we talked forever about product experiments. There's no reason why you can't do a process experiment as well, right? The process change is risky, particularly at scale. How do we de-risk something that is risky? How do we de-risk a big change? We run an experiment, right? So let's build a pilot team. Let's take 5, 6, 10 people, right? We actually have a case study in the book of a telco in the UK that did this. They did 600 people, which is, look, they have 10,000 employees, so 600 is a lot less than 10,000, but it still feels like a lot. But take 10, 15, 20, 25 people, book them for a quarter, and let's say, look, for this quarter, you're going to target outcomes. We're going to give you an OKR. We're going to write a nice customer-centric, outcome-based OKR, and we're going to let you work. And let's see what happens. Right? You're going to do it transparently. You're going to do it publicly. We're going to share your wins, your losses, your pivots, your learnings, etc. And at the end of this, let's say 12-week experiment, we're going to decide if we learned something worth pursuing or if this just isn't going to work here. And in a best case scenario, you've proven the value of the process change. And you've learned enough to say, okay, good, that was 1 team. Let's go to 3 teams and try that for a quarter. And then let's go to 10 teams, and then 25, and then 50, and then 100, and 500, and so forth. So that's another way that you can start to de-risk this conversation.
I really like the beginning of the conversation about experiments, because when I was hearing you talking about, that question to ask the boss, so what do you expect will happen when we do the thing? And sometimes you just have to do the thing. But if you have a concrete, let's call it a bar or like a success definition is what I call it, then you can measure if the thing actually delivered on what you wanted. And this experimentation mindset is very compatible with the outcome-focused management of work, right? Like you're really looking for the impact. And I've been talking about this for a long time as well, and I've followed your work. I mean, with no estimates, for example, that's what we talk about. We don't deliver features. We run experiments to achieve business outcomes or goals, business goals. So what have you learned about bringing that conversation, not just to managers, of course, managers are now included, but now to teams? Because I often face teams that are afraid to even use the word experiment because they associate that with, well, what if it doesn't deliver what we wanted it to deliver?
Yeah. So I just finished a 6-month coaching program with, it was 45 people, and it ended up being about 6 teams in there, 6 months in a big financial services organization, teaching them exactly this, sponsored by, fairly high ranking EVP in the organization. And this was a very visible experiment, 6-month pilot, which we were super grateful to be able to get from this client. 2 of the 6 teams killed their hypotheses over the course of the 6 months. And they were terrified. There's no doubt about it. They're like, crap, it didn't work, right? What do we tell the boss? Just what you just asked me, right? And so we said, great, it didn't work. What were our plans for this? Well, we had a 6-month roadmap. We had 2 engineering teams lined up for this. We had a marketing team ready to go. right? And what was the budget for all of that? Well, for this particular one, it was, I think one team, it was close to $1 million, right? That's our story, right? Our story isn't we killed a bad idea. Our story is we saved the organization $1 million and 3 months worth of time that we can now deploy in a more accurate direction because we've got all this evidence that says that wasn't going to work. The problem still exists. Let's try a different solution. So you have to reframe these, what seems like failures. They're not failures, right? They're learnings. They're a learning that says, this is not what we're going to build, into language that stakeholders care about. I agree. Look, I learned the hard way. When we launched our consulting company, Neo, in January of 2012, I was trying to sell experiments to clients. Nobody wanted to buy experiments back then. That was 12 years ago. Like Lean Startup was the number one book everywhere in 2012, right? Nobody wanted to buy experiments ever, right? People want to buy mobile apps and systems and, services, products. And so the language matters. And so you need to translate your result into language that people care about. We saved the company $1 million. Right? We've redeployed 2 engineering teams on higher value initiatives, right? That's how this becomes like this, how the value of this way of working becomes clearer to the people who matter.
Yeah, and that, of course, brings us to customer centricity in those OKRs. So tell us a little bit more how you and Josh have developed your way of working with OKRs that brings the teams to think about customer centricity and of course, eventually have better customer experiences and customer relationships.
So the first thing that we do with every organization that we work with, regardless of what level we're working at, whether it's the C-level or with product development teams, is we ask them to define the problem that they're solving. Because 98.5% of the time, and I'm being generous, teams start with a defined solution, right? We are building the new credit card processing system, right? Or whatever, rather than, the technology that the old system sits on is now 20 years old and it's causing this issue for this customer and this issue for this customer and this issue for this customer. So that's the first thing we do is we reverse engineer the problem. Now, inevitably, that's a problem for somebody, right? Some human, right? Whether it's a customer, it's just a question of, is it an external customer? Is it a B2B client? Is it internal teams? Is it third-party vendors, right? Whoever's consuming the thing, but it's a problem for somebody. So as soon as we identify the somebody, great, let's have a conversation about that somebody. What do we know? And this is amazing to me because I work primarily with large organizations and with a lot of B2B organizations. And I'll say something like, well, who's your customer? Right? Who's this a problem for? And they'll say, the bank. The bank is not a person. Who at the bank? And they say something like the product team. It's like, okay, good. Let's dig a little like. And so you really have to push folks because this idea of like visualizing the human in the process is still a radical concept for a lot of teams. So we start there. We define the problem. Within that problem, there's a human, there's a customer. We say, okay, great, let's define the customer. Great, what do we know about them? I've never met one. Oh, okay, let's go meet a few, right? And so that's like the process flows, it flows from there. It gets folks from, I'm building a thing to I'm solving a problem for this person. And I'm not 100% sure that this is the right problem, this is the right solution. So I'm going to go talk to some of those folks. Right? We start to extract the assumptions, the risky assumptions from these problem statements, from these personas that we manufacture, and then we go and find out if we're right.
And these conversations, of course, are critical for us to even figure out what might work. Now, if we think about the way teams usually work, is that they are given a set of features or roadmap items, maybe higher level than features that they need to deliver. Now, what you're saying is that maybe we should work differently. We should define who we are working for, right? The customer, the persona you were just talking about, and what problems do they have that we want to solve, right? Validate that the problems really exist and that they do really care about us solving them, and then work from there. But what you're suggesting then leads me to think, okay, but if I work with OKRs this way, I also need to start looking at my roadmaps, because if the roadmaps are a set of features, the OKRs ain't gonna help.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So you're threading the needles here, right? So like it's a domino thing, right? Like you once you do one thing and they all start falling. The roadmaps are a really interesting question, right? Because to your point, roadmaps are generally speaking fixed scope, fixed date documents, right? We're going to ship feature X by Tuesday, feature Y by Thursday, feature Z by Thursday, the next Thursday, whatever it is, right? With OKRs, we have to redefine the roadmap. The commitment that we make on a quarterly basis, let's just say quarters for the sake of simplicity. The commitment that we make on a quarterly basis when we are building OKR-based roadmaps is to the OKR, right? So we have an objective and we have a key result. Who does what by how much, right? So in Q1, we're focused on acquiring, like getting existing customers to download and install and use at least once the new mobile app. Okay, great. So our objective is to make customers more comfortable in the mobile channel. Terrific. And our key result is existing customers. 50% of existing customers download the new mobile app. 25% of existing customers create an account, and 10% use it at least once a week. Something like that. That's our commitment. Our commitment is to those behavior changes. And what's interesting then is that the features that you are considering working on become your hypotheses, right? These are our hypotheses about how we might achieve these behavior changes. And as soon as we can learn that those behavior changes are or are not happening, we can decide what to do with that hypothesis. Maybe we double down on it, we scale it, we deploy it, maybe we pivot on it, maybe we kill it. But the commitment on a quarterly basis is not to a fixed set of features. The commitment is to a behavior change. It's to the key result. And then at the end of that quarter, we review. Hey, what did we learn? What did we ship? What's our progress towards the key result? Does it still make sense to pursue the key results that we have planned? Okay, and if so, what do we think we should do in the next quarter? That's how this stuff starts to shift. So the roadmap document is a living document where the features are the variables, and there's kind of a planning window, roughly of a couple of quarters, where we can predict to some level of certainty what we're going to try during that time frame.
So we heard about OKRs and this approach that you talk about, who does what by how much, as a way to define clear outcome and customer-centric OKRs. We've learned that we need to start thinking about running experiments, right? Because it's not enough to have a goal, who does what by how much, but we need to figure out how do we get there. Yeah. And that's not by having a list of features or user stories, that's by running experiments.
Correct.
And because we are doing that, we need to have different roadmaps. The roadmaps need to be more goal-centric, and they need to be about what experiments we might be trying, i.e. what are the OKRs, right? The goals that we want to work on, and not necessarily a list of features. So this is, I don't know if I described it correctly, but this is what I heard from what you described.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Right. That's how all this stuff threads together, and it's how we start to shift the conversation away. Now look, there's all kinds of challenges here, but the biggest challenge, right? So this is coming back to your original question about why we wrote the book. The biggest challenge is the anxiety that this type of product planning and communication causes with leaders, right? Because look, think about CFO, CEO, CPO, right? All these folks, right? They're used to seeing a year-long roadmap with features and dates and ROI estimates and budgets assigned to everything, so that I know, look, I'm going to give Vasco's team $1 million this year, and they're going to build me this thing. And then in theory, I'm going to see a 5x ROI on that in a couple of years, right? When you take that kind of confidence away from a roadmap, and that's false confidence, by the way, right? It's pure conjecture. It's speculation at best. It is
fiction.
Fiction, right? It's exactly right. It's fiction, right? When you take that away, people don't know. The anxiety kicks in because what are the teams working on? What are they doing? What am I funding? Should I keep funding this? All excellent questions, right? Which return the onus to making this kind of this way of working in OKR successful back to the teams, right? So the teams need to start communicating differently, more transparently, more openly. They need to include different information in their communications, right? What are we learning? Where are we changing course? Why are we changing course, right? All of these types of conversations need to change to make this successful, because otherwise, what ends up happening is some person in a leadership position is going to get too anxious about not knowing what the team is working on or what to expect or what's coming when, and they're going to shut it down. They're going to micromanage it and just say, forget it.
So it's very interesting that you talk about anxiety, because both you and I run our own businesses. And of course, we have to deal with these questions on a daily basis. At least I am not investing $1 million, but I am investing a significant amount of my savings in the business in order to get the products to move and in order to get the business to grow. So even though it's not $1 million, it still is a significant investment. And sure. What I think is that, in my own experience, it is the long-term feature frozen or scope predefined fixed scope perspective. That is what gets me anxious. And when I think about, I hire people to do stuff for me, and when I think about that, I'm thinking actually, I would much rather give them money in a week and then get the results and then decide whether I put another week of funding in, than to give them, as some freelancers will ask me, I need to have 3 months of a project of 3 months to work with. I was like, that's fine, but I'm not going to pay for you to learn what works. I need to learn what works from day one. In fact, what I tell freelancers is that we do 1 experiment per week, and it only takes a week to go from idea to experiment in the market, right? That's the constraint, because I have realized that if I want my business to survive and grow, I need to be learning all the time. And it's interesting that you say that this perspective causes anxiety in leaders, with which I agree. I have seen it myself, when in fact, from the perspective of a business owner, which is myself, I don't want to work without experiments. I would feel uncertain and anxious without experiments, and how that brings specific ways of working.
Yeah, same, right? So as a solopreneur, I'm in the same boat, and the experiments that I tend to run for my business to prove out my ideas tend to be content experiments more than anything else, right? If I've got a new idea, a new theme I'd like to pursue, I put out content experiments. It used to be tweets. I don't do that anymore. But like LinkedIn posts, blog posts, short videos on YouTube, that cost me almost nothing, an hour of my time, right? And I can go from idea to shipped experiment in an hour and a half, maybe 2, and see what resonates, and then do it again and do it a different way and try it a different way and see what goes. And then that tells me whether to invest. Look, this book, this OKR book, if you go read my blog right now, you'll see that the last 3 years worth of posts are about OKRs, 98%. Right. I've been basically writing this book in public for 3 years. And from that alone, I got a sense that A, there's demand for content on OKRs. B, people want to know about X more than they want to know about Y when it comes to OKRs, right? There's all kinds of specifics, and we've tailored the book that way. And so it's crucial to building that learning culture.
Absolutely. And I would love to interview you on that process, maybe another episode, as I myself help authors also publish their books. So I would be very much interested in learning how you structure and run your own experiments, especially when it comes to coming up with ideas and validating ideas for books. But we're getting close to the end, Jeff. That will be another episode. So tell us, where can people find out more about you and where can they get the book?
So the book is on Amazon. So Amazon.com or whatever makes sense for you. You can get all versions there. It's at other bookstores as well, like online digital bookstores. If you're interested, you can get both a digital copy as well as a print copy there. If you're interested in getting a lot of copies of the book, a bulk purchase, you can email me directly at jeff@gothelf.co or just go to okr-book.com. And then lastly, if you want to find me, connect with me on LinkedIn or just go to my website, jeffgothelf.com.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Jeff. Thank you for your generosity with your time and your knowledge.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on the show again, Vasco. It's good to see you.
We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.